Quick note before we start this video, we recorded this before we actually saw Avengers Endgame, but at the time it was confirmed that Spider-Man Far From Home would be the proper ending to Phase 3, which is why we recorded this video. So without further ado, enjoy. Welcome everyone to Marvel Hub. This is DK Dynamite, and today we're going to be talking about Phase 4 of the MCU, since some recent information has changed the upcoming slate of MCU films after Avengers Endgame. Now, as you guys may have heard, Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers have said that Spider-Man Far From Home is actually the ending of Phase 3. Now, they didn't explicitly say whether or not Spider-Man Far From Home is also the ending of the Infinity Saga, but in the past, they've mentioned that phases 1, 2, and 3 are the Infinity Saga, and Phase 4 and beyond will be a different chapter of MCU history. So if we stick with that statement, then technically Spider-Man Far From Home is not only the end of Phase 3, but also the end of the Infinity Saga. Now, what people have been saying online, either on Twitter, Reddit, or YouTube, is that the way that it'll close off Phase 3 will actually be pretty meaningful, since Spider-Man Far From Home will probably be acting as some type of epilogue to Avengers Endgame. Now what that means is, let's say Tony Stark passes away at the ending of Avengers Endgame and Peter witnesses that, he could easily be traumatized by that death at the beginning of Spider-Man Far From Home. And what could also be mentioned about that is that if the snap is actually reversed in Avengers Endgame, then that means when people do return from the Soul Stone, that means that everybody would remember them being dusted away and then somehow returning. So that could easily be felt throughout Spider-Man Far From Home, where you see news reports everywhere and these interviews and people talking about how weird it was to somehow dust away and then to somehow return 5 years later, let's say, after it all happened, and somehow everybody kind of lost 5 years of their life, but they didn't really age at all. So that could be an interesting plot point that's explored. Or if the snap isn't reversed but is instead prevented from ever happening, then you could obviously have characters like Nick Fury and Agent Hill that know about those events thanks to talking to the Avengers, that then talk to Peter about that throughout this film and kind of lecture him as to how to move on from Tony's death or whatever it is that happens at the end of Avengers Endgame. So a lot could happen in Spider-Man Far From Home that is a direct result of things that happened in Avengers Endgame. So in terms of this movie being an epilogue to Phase 3 or to the Infinity Saga, it could definitely work, and they haven't clarified exactly how that will work, but what we could assume is that based on recent reports that the next Spider-Man Far From Home trailer was delayed because it involves and includes a lot of Avengers Endgame spoilers. I think when the next trailer does drop, which will probably be a week or so after Endgame releases, then our questions will be answered as to how Spider-Man Far From Home is a better fit ending to Phase 3 as opposed to just having Avengers Endgame be the ending of Phase 3 or the ending of the Infinity Saga. They did that for a reason. Other people are also claiming that it doesn't make sense to start a new phase just a couple of months after the last one had been ended. So I guess if we're going off how Phase 2 ended, then it does make a little bit of sense. You know, Ant-Man closed off Phase 2, and it wasn't until, what was it, next March when Civil War came out to open up Phase 3. So it definitely makes perfect sense to have a little bit of a gap in between the ending of a phase and the beginning of a new one. But what's confusing about that is that Disney Plus launches this November and will feature some MCU exclusive TV shows right away at launch. And are those shows going to be a part of Phase 3? Are they somehow transitioning into Phase 4? We're not sure how that's going to work just yet, but I'm going to assume the new set of TV shows will be involved within Phase 4 and not Phase 3, but we'll talk more about that later. So in regards to the film slate for Phase 4 of the MCU, we have May 1st, 2020, which is when Black Widow is supposed to release. We have November 6th, 2020, when The Eternals is supposed to come out. We then have February 12th, 2021, which is supposed to be the release date of Black Panther 2. We then have Doctor Strange 2 on May 7th, 2021. We then have November 5th, 2021, which may in fact be the release date of Shang-Chi. We have an open film slate for February 18th, 2022, and we then have May 6th, 2022 for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So there is a question mark next to Shang-Chi because Charles Murphy, who posted this release date list, isn't too sure if that's the actual release date for Shang-Chi, but also keep in mind, there's an open slot in here, and as I mentioned previously in another Phase 4 video, this could easily be the release date for another Spider-Man sequel. It could be the release date for Captain Marvel 2. We just don't know as of right now what that film is going to be, but based on recent rumors that Thor 4 was pitched, Tessa Thompson actually confirmed that recently, that the movie itself was pitched, and that's what she's been hearing. She can't confirm the legitimacy behind that claim, but she is hearing that, which does mean that Taika Waititi, Chris Hemsworth, and Tessa Thompson might in fact be returning for a fourth Thor movie at some point in Phase 4, and that could easily be released on February 18th, 2022. Maybe even sooner than that. Maybe Shang-Chi doesn't come out until 2022, and maybe that November 5th release date is actually for Thor 4. So we don't know what that movie is going to be just yet, but according to Charles Murphy, this is a pretty accurate idea as to what the Phase 4 film slate will end up looking like after Avengers Endgame. Now, in terms of the films themselves, I'll go over some of the casting details for these movies. We have Spider-Man Far From Home featuring Remy Hyde playing Peter's classmate Amadis Chow, I believe his name is. We have JB Smoove playing Peter's teacher, Mr. Dell. We have Numan Akkar playing Russian mobster Dmitry Smerdakov. I can't say that name at all. We then have Michael Mando returning as Mac Gargan. Obviously, we have Zendaya playing MJ, Samuel Jackson playing Nick Fury, Kobe Smulders playing Agent Hill, and obviously Tom Holland as Spider-Man, next to Jake Gyllenhaal playing Mysterio. We then move on to Black Widow, where we have Scarlett Johansson, Julie Delpy, Jeremy Renner, and supposedly Samuel Jackson returning as Nick Fury. We then have Florence Pugh is in early talks for the female villain after Emma Watson passed. We have Andre Holland, Trevante Rhodes, and David Gaisai, amongst others, auditioned for the male villain. But as of right now, it seems like David Harbour is going to be getting the role of the main villain throughout the Black Widow film. Now, when we have the Eternals here, it looks like Marvel wants a very diverse cast. Obviously, Angelina Jolie has been rumored for a role in this upcoming film, but along with that, we have women of color such as Margot Damian, the human who befriends the Eternals. We have a short list including Ana de Armas, Isa Gonzalez, Gina Rodriguez, and Naomi Scott. We then have Alexander Skarsgård, Armie Hammer, Sam Heughan, and Charlie Hunnam are being eyed for the male lead. So pretty interesting stuff here. Now moving on to Shang-Chi, we then have several Asian and Asian American actors auditioning for the lead role in the next few months. Now amongst them are Yosin An, Yai-Fi Lu, Daniel Wu, Louis Tan, Jian Ting, and Karen Fukuhara. Sorry if I definitely butcher some of these names here. But we then have Donnie Yen being eyed for the villain, which to me is absolutely mind-blowing. Donnie Yen, the Ip Man, being the villain here in Shang-Chi. That would be fantastic. Cannot wait to see if that actually comes to see the light of day. But we then have Black Panther 2 featuring Chadwick Boseman, Michael B. Jordan, Lupita Nyong'o, Denai Guerrera, Latita Wright, Angela Bassett, Winston Duke, Danielle Kaluuya, and Martin Freeman returning. We have Ryan Coogler wanting Mahershala Ali for a role, but his involvement with Luke Cage might prevent that. So we then have Halle Berry, Naomi Harris, Regina King, Thandel Newton, and a few others being eyed for roles in the film. Now moving on to Doctor Strange 2, we have Benedict Cumberbatch, Rachel McAdams, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Benedict Wong returning to the film. We then have Scott Derrickson wanting Joaquin Phoenix as the main villain. Now it's kind of funny because Joaquin almost played the actual lead role in Doctor Strange himself, but had to drop out because he wasn't committed to signing a multi-picture deal. So he could end up being the main villain here in the sequel, which would be quite interesting. Now we then have Captain Marvel 2 with apparently Brie Larson and Jude Law returning. Gugu Mbatha-Raw being eyed for Monica Rambeau. She had talks about playing Maria Rambeau, but they fell through. And also, in fact, Brad Pitt was approached for Marvel before the character was entirely reworked. So that's definitely interesting now. And obviously for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, we have Chris Pratt, David Bautista, Bradley Cooper, Vin Diesel, Pom Klementieff, Karen Gillan, and Elizabeth Debicki expected to return. Before being fired, James Gunn was eyeing Zac Efron and Liam Neeson 4 roles. Now, I'm gonna assume since Zoe Saldana wasn't included on this list, it's just to avoid spoilers for Avengers Endgame, but not sure if that was intentional or not. I'm gonna assume she's in the film since she's spoken about Guardians 3 before and was pretty upset when Gunn got fired from Guardians 3 in the first place, so pretty sure she's returning. And I'm gonna say that with 99.9% confidence since it wouldn't be a fitting end to the Guardians trilogy without Gamora there in the story. But that's about it for the casting rumors for the upcoming Phase 4 films, as we previously reported about a month and a half ago. Now, as I've said before, take this all with a grain of salt. These plans could easily change at the very last minute. As we saw with Phase 3, we had Captain America the Serpent Society, which is a bit of a meme to kind of hide the fact that Civil War would be opening up Phase 3 for the MCU. We then had the release dates for Captain Marvel and Black Panther changed around. The Inhumans movie was scrapped. Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2 then changed into just Infinity War and then Endgame. And we also had a Spider-Man solo film make a surprise appearance in Phase 3 after Sony and Marvel made a deal to include Spider-Man in Civil War, then to have a solo film later in Phase 3. So anything could happen. As we said earlier, we have a Captain Marvel 2, which is apparently already in the works, could easily make its way over onto the slate. We have a mysterious Thor 4, which was recently pitched to Marvel according to Tessa Thompson, and maybe even a Spider-Man sequel at the very end of Phase 4. We have no idea what could happen throughout Phase 4, so as of right now, take this all with a grain of salt. As I said, Spider-Man Far From Home is going to be closing off Phase 3, which easily could mean we could see a Spider-Man Far From Home sequel later on in Phase 4 towards the end. This also means that Black Widow in 2020 will apparently be opening up Phase 4 of the MCU, which is a really bold decision. Cannot wait to see how that film turns out. And we also have those Disney Plus TV shows, which some are actually starting this November with the launch of the service, which is also raising some questions as to whether or not that'll be opening up Phase 4 before the release of Black Widow next June. So without a doubt, this is my DK Dynamite. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn notifications on to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Marvel news and information. Really hope you've enjoyed, and peace out, everyone.